So in the biggest, most kumbaya reason to raise awareness of ageism at its heart, at its ugly, ugly heart, it is this idea that to become old is to lose value as a human being, which is a despicable, disgusting, unethical value that, does us no favors. I mean, there's the saying that you judge a country or a politic by the way it treats its most vulnerable members. You all know all this.
Welcome back to Aging Vibrantly, Conversations to Empower Seniors and Elder Abuse Prevention Ontario podcast. I am Raeann Rideout, host of the show, where we amplify the voices of seniors who impart their expertise and wisdom to enhance our understanding of aging issues and ways of living a safe and fulfilling life with respect and dignity. This is part 2 of our episode, Rebelling Against Ageism. If you missed part 1, we encourage you to listen to the previous episode as Ashton Applewhite imparts her insights on defining ageism and refining how we think, feel, and act towards aging. My co-host, April Struthers, and I continue our conversation on ageism with our guest, Ashton, the author of This Chair Rocks, a Manifesto Against Aging and co-founder of the Old School Hub. So let's rejoin our conversation on discussing internalized ageism.
And it's kind of that internal, that personal internal attitude about how we think of ourselves, and how ageism shows up in society. It's also internalized about how we think about ourselves, right? And I don't know if you could speak a little bit about that and what people say to us really plays into our mindset about how, it can lead to depression, it can lead to anxiety, the whole internal feeling that we're having about ourselves. If we have a gray hair or we have, this inability, and we just hosted an educational session on internalized ageism and had a huge turnout for people wanting to learn more about that, because we talk a lot about society, how people are treating others, but we don't think about our own internal way of how we view ourselves when we look in the mirror and look back and say, which creates even more, more of an issue. So maybe you could speak a little bit more on that.
And you feel terrible that you've had these negative feelings, which you shouldn't have. And then you're down the wormhole even deeper. Yeah. I mean, but what's the question you'd like me to?
No, I was just going to say, have you, in your work, have you heard more about internalized ageism and what people are doing to address that and
Sure.
in the work?
I mean, I think it does always, all change starts within. I think the Buddha said that, or, somebody, not me. We can't change the culture without changing ourselves. And then once we see it in ourselves, then we can zoom out, and zooming out is really important to see the structures that hold us all, that imprison younger people as well as older people. That's like patriarchy is what makes life harder for women, whether you are 21 or 81, right? See what the forces are that we are all united against. One of the things I could not say when I started thinking about this and writing about it almost 20 years ago now was that ageism makes you sick. And we can say that now. There is a ton of data showing that attitudes towards aging affect how your minds and bodies function at the cellular level. That's why the World Health Organization developed an ageism campaign. They are in the health business, not the old people business. So one really good reason to learn more about age and aging is to stay healthier longer. And it may sound counterintuitive because our assumption of just thinking about aging is that it's going to be sad and depressing and all about illness. So just looking at the thing that scares you makes it less scary, right? I mean, I used to jump, from my childhood bed from as far away as possible so the monster didn't grab my ankles, and eventually I looked under the bed and there were just dust bunnies. There are monsters. You are not going to hear me say aging is easy, right? There's many challenges to it, and we need to be honest about them. It's why I don't love talking about positive aging or encountering having a positive age. You're allowed to be scared by the stuff you're scared by, getting sick. ending up alone, running out of money. Those are real fears, legit fears. They are made much worse. Zoom out by the absence of social support, by the absence of a social safety net, by the absence of communitarian ethics, by the absence of communal living situations, etc. But look under the bed, look at aging, learn about aging and ageism, and it all gets a lot less scary because we only hear the negative side. And think about where those messages come from. I mean, no one makes money off satisfaction. If your wrinkles are really, really a terrible problem, and for people, lots of people, they are, especially, I don't say a word about whatever a woman in particular wants to do to make herself feel good, more power to you. If movie stars need to get sliced and diced, think of the pressures on them. No judgment. Let's stop judging each other, right? But a system designed to exploit our insecurities only works if we agree to it. And working together against those values, it's the work of a lifetime. We have to do it together. We have to do it at all ages. But I want to plug actually some free resources at a website called the Old School Hub, oldschool.info. Hundreds of carefully vetted resources to educate yourself about aging and ageism. I mean, it's all focused on ageism. Everything is free except the books. And among it, you will find a couple of guides that I wrote or wrote with collaborators, which are like how to identify your internalized bias and how it operates in the world. Who me, ageist? Is like, guess what? Ageist sexist, who me? Is about the intersection of ageism and sexism. Ageist racist, who me? Is about how age and race intersect. So they're guides to starting a consciousness raising group, because that's a process by which people come together, compare notes, and go, oh, it's not my fault. You know, the reason I get no respect at work is not because my tits are too big or my boss is a jerk, both of which may be, of course, terrible, true problems, but it's because these are experiences we are all having, right? And that is really, really empowering. So there is tons and tons of stuff on the website. One of them is a fantastic book by Becca Levy. And all you have to do is search Old School for Levy or search Old School for Who Me, a book called Breaking the Age Code. She's a psychologist and epidemiologist. And the subtitle of her book is How Your Beliefs About Aging Determine How Long and How Well You Will Live. And Becca is a very careful social scientist. I met her 15 years ago and I'm like, why don't you write about ageism? And she didn't say, mind your own business, which she should have. And she didn't say, I'm not ready to yet. But when she had the data, boy, did she ever.
Yeah. I just have to say how good the Old School Hub is for materials, for the range of materials, for the carefulness with which each one has been assembled, and the ability to communicate some quite difficult concepts, really, but in a way
it's complicated.
That's accessible. And I've used it in various curriculum development myself, and have really appreciated the care that's gone into that. That's great to hear. So,
yeah, I mean, it was an idea of mine. Oh, gosh, over almost 10 years ago. I thought, this movement is new. Wouldn't it be great to have all the good resources in one place? Wouldn't it have been amazing if the women's movement had some sort of... So at that time, I asked someone to help me with it, and they enlisted another person, and they turned out to be, I was very lucky, amazing collaborators. And we, scraped around the internet, and it was, 180, I forget how, we started with less than 100 resources. And we thought it would just be a spreadsheet we'd update every once in a while. And it has grown to much more than that. We just this fall transitioned from the Old School Clearinghouse, because it really started as a repository of resources. But of course, if you're going to help build a movement, you need to bring people together. So we started hosting convenings during the pandemic, virtual ones. We started hosting something we still do every Wednesday, something called Office Hours, open to anyone to talk about anything ageism related. It's very casual. I'm almost always there. So go to oldschool.info. You'll go to events, or it's easy to find. And you just show up in a Zoom. And we just had our first in-person convening in Montreal in August, which was amazing.
Yes.
And we became the Old School hub for age equity and ageism awareness, because we're going to keep being a resource bank. But part of the new hub is a projects page where if you are working on a project of any sort at any level of development and you would like advice or co-conspirators, we don't have deep pockets, but maybe we can help you get funding, submit it to the hub, and a group that is in the process of forming will help advise you and tell you what we think of it and help you connect to people, with the idea that, of course, we find we're not the boss of it. We don't own it. We will simply put you in touch with people who can inform you and advise you to the degree that you want help and advice. But that we need to find out what each other is doing and support each other and learn from each other, not reinvent the damn wheel.
Right.
I think that's an accelerator for social change, actually.
I hope so.
Just talking about the projects and work that, people wanting more information about is, the work that we do around elder abuse prevention. And there are slowly becoming more evidence-based research and work being done to link between ageism and elder abuse prevention. I just wondered what your thoughts are around addressing ageism as a critical strategy in preventing elder abuse.
There are 1,000 answers to that, and I'm pretty sure that's a question you could answer better than I could. A couple of things come to mind. One of the reasons that elder abuse gets so little attention relative to the abuse of children, of domestic violence, all of which are super important. And I'm not saying for a second that we should spend less energy on those other things and more on elder abuse. I'm saying elder abuse deserves more attention, period, is because of ageism in society. We don't think about ageism. And we don't think about older people. And honestly, to be honest, elder abuse is the really, darkest, most awful corner of that universe. And we need to think about it. Another reason it's underreported is that so many people who experience elder abuse are embarrassed. They are ashamed to ask for help. And worst of all, because of their own internalized age bias, they may think they do not deserve it. So in the biggest, most kumbaya reason to raise awareness of ageism at its heart, at its ugly, ugly heart, it is this idea that to become old is to lose value as a human being, which is a despicable, disgusting, unethical value that, does us no favors. I mean, there's the saying that you judge a country or a politic by the way it treats its most vulnerable members. You all know all this.
That's
so
right.
that is one reason that ageism is important. Older people receive much fewer resources. Many fewer resources are allocated towards older people, disabled older people. That all this money goes to kids, which is fantastic. Don't take a penny away, but look at the preponderance of the problem and distribute it to age groups in proportion to our percentage of the population, right? And ageism also sanctions discrimination. Right? And isolation. Othering makes, if you other a group, if you see it as other than yourself, that usually means lesser, perhaps frightening. People are frightened to look at older people, and that makes their well-being less of a human right. One of the reasons nursing homes came into being was, what did Bill Thomas say? He called it a shotgun marriage between the poorhouse and the something else. But, they, like Social Security, it lifted hundreds of thousands of older Americans, and I'm guessing the same is true in Canada, out of poverty, and it gave people a place to live, but it also put older people out of sight. And it moved us out of the workforce, sometimes not on terms of our own choosing. So I'm on a big tear now. I always need a big tear, to bring older and younger people together to talk about this, to talk about the hard stuff, to talk about age and power, to talk about and visibility. Who are we visible to? and on whose terms, right? And I'm happy to say this is another place there has been a lot of progress. There are many, many more programs now, usually billed as intergenerational initiatives, but to bring older and young people together. I want some of those meetups to be dedicated to talking about age and power, about what it's like to be young now, about what it was like to be young in 1970. How are they different? How do they overlap? Where do those differences matter? We need to respect them. What do they tell us about the big honking thing we're all up against, which is facing barriers to access and opportunity and healthcare, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, because of how old someone thinks we are. For younger people, they can't imagine being old. That's just human. They want the right to vote earlier, right? I think they should have it, right? There are lots of ways in which we discriminate against younger people too, even kids that should deserve our attention as well. And that's how we frame it, as a shared barrier, right? As something, obviously, if we have younger and older people on the team, it's not only going to make your initiative more effective, it's going to inherently reduce ageism, just the way having people of all races and ethnicities in the room in a respectful conversation reduces racism, because it's really hard to be racist about people if you're meeting them and seeing like, oh, I like that person, I can't stand that person, but it's not because of what color they happen to be or how old they happen to be. It's because of their values or whatever.
It's just going back in terms of, sorry, April, I was just going to say, just getting back to, bringing people together and why getting it on the agenda is also getting the politicians and the decision makers that are influencing laws and putting the funding where the dollars need to go, is getting them in the room to understand the importance of including age and older people in these conversations. And
absolutely,
because, it's not only, we're moving towards age-friendly communities, which is great, and having, communities of all ages. So it's not just them and us. So everyone is equal and there's inclusion. But it is sometimes that struggle up the hill to try to get those decision makers or policy makers to make this a priority. And like you've already mentioned about elections and to speak to the people who are in charge to make this a priority. So go ahead, Laura.
There's a zillion, we haven't even touched on the huge cost of ageism, and here we have capitalism for once on our side, in that, if older people are forced out of the workplace, it's going to cost us money. This is why I am hoping, that there will be, AARP is the obvious organization to spearhead this, but they are worse than useless. A public health campaign, an anti-ageism campaign as a public health initiative, because whether you love old people or hate us, whether you think population aging is a gift or a disaster, you don't want us to be sick and cost money. And changing people's attitudes. There's so much about aging we can't control, right? Those turnings of the global economy, whether we slip on a piece of ice outside your front door. Watch out, Canadians. But we can control our attitudes. It's not easy to change these ingrained habits of thinking. That's what bias is, but it's doable and it's free, and the health effects are immediate and measurable. Levy did a study that showed that the annual cost of ageism in healthcare alone, in the US alone, 1 year, $83 billion. So there are certain forces in the market that should encourage this, although they're not moving the needle as fast. There's a zillion studies that show that older workers are every bit as competent as younger people, that the ideal teams are mixed age. Duh. And yet there's all this bias in hiring, et cetera, against hiring. Nothing about prejudice is rational. But when we, come together, learn to communicate effectively, coordinate our actions, we make change.
Wow. And you've hit the high points of change, I think. Just going back to intergenerational actions, ideas, everything that I'm doing these days, I'm kind of a late learner about intergenerational stuff, but I'm trying to infuse it into anything that I do now.
Fantastic. I didn't start writing till I was in my 40s. I didn't think about the word ageism till I was in my late 50s. So here's to late starters.
there's still time.
There's time.
There's some Canadian research that's done recently that says that intergenerational programs will work if, and they can be very small and low cost. They just need to have people standing shoulder to shoulder doing something together across generations, and then an education piece as well. So I guess really to just frame, okay, so how is this different than what might have happened, or how, how is this different from what you thought 5 years ago, how this could be? So now I'm banging on doors to get funding to do more of those.
Fantastic. I mean, to cite the World, you'd think I'm a shill for the World Health Organization, but they, this is a 10-year campaign to combat ageism. And one of the first tools they released after the initial global report, which was the first global study about ageism, is called Connecting the Generations. And it is because it's not just about bringing some old and young people together and saying, hey, here you are, go be friends. But being engaged in a task together gives you something to do, something to talk about, and you'll discover who's fun to work with and who isn't. And it's not going to be because of their age or their skin color. It's going to be because of affinity on more important things. And the reason the World Health Organization did that is because intergenerational contact is proven. There's the data to show it, to reduce ageism. But you do need a facilitator, especially if you are going to do what I want people to do, which is to actually talk about the elephant in the room. How does aging shape us? How is it different for each of us? Right now we live in divided times, and age is not used. I mean, it's sort of the good side of ageism being so unexamined is that efforts to pit old against young are less obvious than efforts to pit Black against white or, urban against rural. But having conversations about this, who holds power because of their age, when and where? How does my power as an older person, do I use it against younger people? Do younger people use it against me? And what are the consequences we all face? That's how you build authentic relationships, but you do need skilled facilitators. But as you just said, you already are doing this. There are tools that are available to you. There are tools on Old School. And every conversation, you making a significantly older or younger friend is itself an anti-ageist act.
Which that was actually just leading into my next question or comment. It was around, you're, obviously this leader and growing a better place for people to grow older. And how do we encourage individuals in society to be champions for change, to promote positive aging and challenge ageism? And as you've already said, small actions can make a big difference, which we totally intergenerational is one concept or one idea that and program that people are implementing across different countries and communities. But I just wonder if you have any other ideas around how we can all, after we leave listening to this conversation today, what actions can we take to promote and dismantle, I guess, ageism and challenge ageism?
It depends on who you are and where you are. I think, a lot of people are concerned about ageism in the workplace because if you can't pay your rent or feed your kids, you don't have much bandwidth for anything else. I think it's important to realize that we have made real progress in recent years about acknowledging racist comments in the workplace, gender inequity, the business about where a woman says something smart and then 5 minutes later a guy says the same thing. And they're like, God, he's a genius, when it's literally the same ideas that came out of her head. We notice now when everyone in the room is white, I think, or more. We notice when everyone on the panel is male. It's called a manel. Train ourselves, for example, to notice when everyone in the room is the same age. Is there a good reason? Seldom. It's habit. Train and say, how come? Do what we each need to do is step forward. If you are worried about risking your job, I fully understand you may not feel safe doing that. But every time we witness or suffer an ageist comment or behavior, if we don't speak up, we give it a pass, and we pass the opportunity to challenge it. And what you really want to do is just raise the question of, gee, was that okay? Would a similar comment on the basis of race or gender pass muster? Would you send someone a business card that mocked who they slept with, or how fat they were, right? And if the answer is no, what makes this okay? And if you can say that in a way, a really good all-purpose response to an ageist comment, because you can never think of the thing, or, I've gotten better at saying, don't call me old lady, young lady, which is not helpful. Then they're like, oh, sorry, I meant to compliment you. And I'm like, well, you didn't. And that's not helpful to anyone. You don't want to put people on the defensive, but say, what do you mean by that? Or, tell me more about, what does old feel like? Without being snarky. And to do that to ourselves, here's another one. When you get to a party or you get to a meeting, do you make a beeline for people your own age? We all nod. I do too.
Yeah.
That's an ageist habit, and it takes courage to go. I think because of internalized ageism, we older people, we think, oh, if I go talk to those young people, they're going to roll their eyes. They're not going to want to talk to me. Well, maybe if they're idiots, but idiots come in all ages, and they probably will be perfectly delighted or won't care, and you just might make a friend, or, you'll know, whatever. It is a risk worth taking, and it is a small risk. Yeah. You can always just go back and get another drink. And it is how we change the culture bit by bit by bit by bit.
Yeah, exactly.
And so I have to say there was a younger person that I've been now working with for some time who has spoken about being the young person in the room.
That's no fun either.
No one would talk to them, it would seem, and talked about their deep yearning to have a way to reach out, I guess.
Yeah, my co-creator of Old School, she and her husband have spent some time in Minneapolis, and they bought into a building that had a reading group, and it was all older women, and they were not nice to her. And she's not making it up, right? And I was like, dang, you would think, I'm always so grateful. I'm the opposite, but I have a lot of younger friends. If reaching across these gaps were easy, my friend group would look like the Rainbow Coalition, and it does not. I am less comfortable reaching across racial divides, reaching across class divides. It takes work. It's awkward. It's slow. It's confusing, but that's a beautiful example. Thank you so much, because it shows that the power goes in both directions, and it's clearly benefiting from her friendship with you, and you are from her. Not in her age is a piece of that, but it's more because of the kind of person she is and what you have in common, or what values you share, or a shared goal or objective. Those things happen across age. Age is almost irrelevant.
Yeah,
that's so true. Well, as we wrap up, I really want to thank you for your time today. I think we've learned a lot more about ageism. We do want to ask you one final question, just related to our podcast. So what advice would you give to empower someone or seniors to age vibrantly?
I would say learn more about age and aging.
Yes.
Right. Check yourself for, and this is a little bit in your face, so maybe I could come up with a more, I just did give a whole bunch of ideas that are a little gentler, but one of the big tells, and that sounds so like accusatory and icky, so please believe me, I don't mean it that way, but when I am in the company of people who work in what I call Ageland or work in aging services, who clearly have more road behind them than ahead, and they're still talking about older people as them, not us. Think about why, now I'm sounding like everyone who listens to this is going to be like that, and I don't mean to say that, but when you encounter that, think about why they are othering the group to which they belong, and think about who that benefits. Who fosters this sense of estrangement? right? There are all sorts of social and political forces that are not our friends that work on all of us. And just, I mean, I hate to say it, read my book. It's not free, but it will make you feel much, much better about the years ahead, I think. I mean, they're nodding. And it will open your eyes to, again, these forces that want us to be afraid and want us to be divided.
Great. Thank you so much again. We really do appreciate you joining us today, and look for our show notes for all the links to Ashton's, the website for the Old School Hub, her book, the Manifesto, This Chair Rocks, the Manifesto, and we will look forward to maybe connecting with you at future events and other educational sessions. So we really appreciate you joining us today. And thank you, April, my great co-host on the podcast. So it's always nice to collaborate and work on these initiatives together to raise awareness around ageism and continue to do these small steps to make a big difference in the world, to make sure all seniors are valued, not only as we all age, not just older adults themselves, but people across all ages. So thank you again, and we appreciate you coming.
You're welcome. Today. Keep up your good work.
We want to thank our guest, Ashton Applewhite, and you, our listeners, for listening to this episode of Aging Vibrantly. We hope you have learned about ageism, and our conversation has inspired and empowered you to stand up for your rights and others and stop ageism. We can't afford to limit ourselves and other people with negative and harmful views of aging. Our call to action is for you to check out the Old School Hub to learn more about ageism. We're all growing older, so let's change our future now. By changing and challenging ageist attitudes and behaviors, we can help create communities where older people feel safe, valued, and respected. We can all be part of this movement to end ageism. You can check out other episodes on wherever you listen to your podcast, or check out our website at eapon.ca to learn more on ageism, to book a speaking engagement, an educational webinar, training session, or just access our tools and resources, videos on ageism and other issues on abuse prevention and protecting the rights and dignity of older adults. To find more information on ageism and links to resources shared by our guest Ashton, please check out our show notes. And don't forget, if you like the podcast, the best way to help us grow and support is to like, share, and rate the show. And leave us a review. Your feedback matters to us. Your likes and shares and reviews help us increase our ratings so others like yourself can find our Aging Vibrantly podcast. This podcast is funded by the Government of Canada's New Horizons for Seniors program and is produced and edited by Todd Miller of Podcast Experts with the support of Lisa Whitfield, Project Coordinator. Until next time, stay vibrant.